all across America and around the world. This is Veterans Radio. This is Veterans Radio.
Welcome to Veterans Radio. I am Jim Fausone. I'm the officer of the deck today. We've got some great programs for you. I think you'll find very interesting. We always want to remind you can find more about Veterans Radio at its Facebook site or by going to veteransradio.net, where we're on the web 24/7. You can find a lot of our podcasts there as well. We post new ones every Tuesday, so you can get a new story, a new interview, something you didn't know before by going to veteransradio.net. And before we get started, we want to thank our sponsors. First up, we want to thank National Veteran Business Development Council, nvbdc.org. It was established to certify both service-disabled and veteran-owned businesses. You'll find out how they can help your business by going to nvbdc.org. We want to thank Legal Help for Veterans. Legal Help for Veterans fights for veterans' disability rights all across the nation. You can reach them at 800-693-4800 or on the web at legalhelpforveterans.com. We want to welcome to Veterans Radio today an attorney, Mike Cox, who some people may know. We'll tell you a little bit why you might know him, but Mike's a Marine veteran. Mike, welcome to Veterans Radio.
Hey, Jim, it's great to be on with a great American on a great show.
Well, thanks. We've been doing Veterans Radio now going into our 20th year, so we're really kind of trying to celebrate this upcoming year, and we're glad to have you on. And let me set this up. We want to talk about what's going on in the Camp LeJeune water contamination exposure. There was a law passed this year, and there's a lot of activity going on so that people know about their rights. But before we get into that, that's what the program's going to be, listeners. You might remember the name Mike Cox if you're in the state of Michigan area. Mike was the Attorney General for the state of Michigan for 8 years, from 2003 to 2011. But what you might not remember is that he was in the Marine Corps from 1980 to 1983. He got out, used the GI Bill, and went to the University of Michigan to get his undergraduate degree, and then ultimately his law degree in 1989. But Mike, before we get too far into this, your family has quite a history of service to the country. Tell us a little bit about the other members of your family who have also served.
Sure. And thanks for that, Jim, because we're all creations of the people around us, right? And so my dad, John Cox, was an immigrant, legal immigrant in 1949, came here with $20 in his pocket and was a journeyman carpenter. And lo and behold, soon after he got here, within like 5 months, North Korea, what's now we now call North Korea, invaded South Korea. And so in those days, immigrants had selective service numbers that made it really easy for them to be drafted. And so within 9, 8, 10 months of crossing the border here, my dad was in Korea with a couple different units.
Welcome to the United States, but I suppose it's one way to make the melting pot work. So,
but I got to tell you, as he told us so many times when we were kids growing up, it was so much better than going back to Europe, which was still wiped out by World War II. And when he came to Michigan, when he came to Detroit, he literally thought the streets were paved with gold, and he was more than willing. So many other Americans have for 240 plus years now to fight for our nation and to defend the ideal. So he ended up in Korea. He was on a number of infamous battles of sorts, including one on Old Baldy. He eventually, during his 2 years, rose to be a staff sergeant. He was in a heavy weapons platoon and saw untold amounts of combat, and came back and settled down in Detroit and raised a family, and that was the background for me. That it's funny. I ended up in the Marines, but I wanted to become a Green Beret. And at the recruiting station on the way in, the Marines had the first door. So I started looking at their pamphlets, and then it was pamphlets, right, in 1980. And the gunnery sergeant came out there and nabbed me. But since my time in the Marines, I'm very proud to say that two of my children, have served their nation or are serving their nation. So my oldest daughter, who's now 39, was a corporal in the Marines. So she was with the 9th Communications Battalion and in Camp LeJeune for 13 months from 2004 to 2005. Obviously, as a woman in communication, she wasn't directly in combat, but a number of her friends and colleagues were killed, and so she did her 4 years. Was very proud of that. Just like me, she has a Marine Corps tattoo. I'm not crazy about that for herself or me, but I'm very proud and should be very proud because we're taping this. The day on the eve of the Marine Corps birthday, we'll both celebrate, text each other, and then we have one wayward. I have 4 kids. I have a wayward son that Jim.
Absolutely.
Who went to U.S. Naval Academy, just graduated this year. Did very, very well, but he made one major mistake. He didn't go in the Marines, so he's a surface warfare officer. He's in destroyer school right now, and he wants to be a SEAL, but he's got to do a tour at sea first. And his name's Rory. Very proud of him. And I have a nephew in Air Cav right now in Fort Campbell. My nephew my nephew Patrick, and his brother Brendan was with the Marines. They did 2 tours in Afghanistan. One when it was very a lot of combat, and the second time around, it had a different mission in the Helmand province. But from the humble beginnings of a humble immigrant, my dad, I like to think our family has come to value, what the defense of our nation means, as you know, given that your spouse was a brigadier general. So I'm very proud of that family background. And
well, I'll tell you, it is a great family tradition that your dad started. Service to the country really has to be recognized and held up as for the importance that it is. And that's part of the reason I could have had any lawyer on to talk about Camp LeJeune and what's going on in the new recent legislation. But I wanted to bring to our listeners somebody who not only has served at the highest office, law enforcement office in the state of Michigan as the Michigan Attorney General, who has a background as a county prosecutor, but somebody whose family has served. So this isn't just a legal issue I can make a few bucks on. This is something in the Cox family DNA that we've got to do right by those who serve in the military, and those who've passed through Camp LeJeune have been really harmed for a long time, and it's not been recognized. Congress has finally gotten around to doing that a little bit. So tell us about the new law and what that does for those who spent 30 days plus at Camp LeJeune during the period of August 1953 through December of 1987.
Well, Jim, what it does for people like me, because that includes me, I was in Camp LeJeune with a Westpac float from the early summer of 1982 until April 15th of 1983, when I got my walking papers. So I was discharged. So if you did 30 days, then it doesn't have to be consecutive, but if you did 30 days, so you could be in reserves doing training, and whether you were a Marine, a sailor, some other armed forces member, or a family or a dependent member of the family, if you lived on base, or even if you were a base employee, as long as you had 30 days, from February 53 through December 31st of 1987, you're eligible for consideration under this law. And it's part of the Camp LeJeune Justice Act of 2022, which President Biden signed into law on August 10th and passed both the House and Senate with strong bipartisan support. And it's as you know, Jim, being a lawyer, it's not very often that any government entity goes back after 35 years and changes the statute of limitations. But I think, especially having been at Camp LeJeune during the time, this really cried out, and that the Congress and the president responded. So what happened? Should I start with what happened?
Yeah, go ahead. Let's set up how this contamination got there and how it impacted those who had that time of service at Camp LeJeune.
Yeah, so anyone who's ever been to Camp LeJeune or that part of North Carolina, or it'd be very similar to Fort Benning in Georgia, I expect, and very similar to Fort Campbell in Kentucky. But especially in Camp LeJeune, it's a very sandy base. It's 450 square miles along the ocean, Atlantic. And so Camp LeJeune, historically, from the time it was put together during World War II, it had 100 shallow groundwater wells, right? That fed into 8 different water systems, and because of the sand, and I'm not a geologist, but because of some of the unique nature, some of the unique features of the geography there, had this sort of bowl system where if a toxin got in the water in any of the wells, it would immediately leach across the base. And so ultimately what happened over the period of time I and many others were there were 4 main toxins, these deadly chemicals that are recognized by the EPA, recognized by scientists as deathly or have high morbid or mortality rates that leaked into the water. There was, and I wish I could pronounce them, but I'll just tell you the initials. TCE is one of them, PCE. Benzene, which a lot of people know because it's a common byproduct of a variety of oils and gases, as well as vinyl chloride. And so what happened is with the shallow wells, there was 3-4 main pollution toxin sources. One was, as you can imagine, with the spit and polish marines, one was the ABC 1-hour dry cleaner on base, which anyone who went there probably got their dress blues or their dress uniforms done there, and that was right on the main part of base at Lejeune and Tarawa Boulevard. And they, like many other cleaning facilities in the 50s, 60s, 70s, just took their cleaning fluids and dumped them into the ground.
Yeah, this was real common all across the country. Perchloroethylene, that PCE, was the common solvent for dry cleaning. And when it got spent and couldn't clean things anymore, it just got dumped out the back door generally.
And you're 100% right. So many dry cleaning facilities, and this was a huge one, are much like gas stations in terms of the amount of toxins they produce. And so from the industrial solvents, which contain the toxins TCE and PCE, and this for anyone who'd ever been on the base, this dry cleaner was right by Tarawa Terrace. For Marines, the Battle of Tarawa was a very key battle, in the early parts of World War II. And so this Tarawa Terrace was built, and that's one of the primary facilities of base housing. And so connected to it was the Tarawa Terrace water plant. And in the same area, they also had underground storage tanks, which would have other degreasing solvents, that they use for cleaning everything from trucks to solvents from cleaning your weapons. When I was there for my M16, or folks before me with their M1s, and that was located nearby at Had Knot Point for anyone who's familiar. And so, the toxins there bled into the other water plants. There was a Holcomb Boulevard water plant where the base hospital was, and these 3 main plants fed not only enlisted base housing, fed the barracks where I was, where unmarried Marines would stay, the administrative office, schools, recreational areas, and ultimately a combination of metal cleaners, gas and fuel. That there's an estimate at one time in the groundwater by the late 80s, there was a 1 million gallon lake of fuel in the groundwater.
Yeah, this is just, it's been known, you said 1980s, it's been known for, what do we have, about 40 years now that this stuff is there. It took a long time for VA to say, well, maybe some of your disabilities are related to these exposures to benzene and TCE and PCE. Yeah. Congress kind of had to get involved to get VA to pay attention and create some presumptive diseases out of that. But what they did in the Camp LeJeune Justice Act of 2020, which is kind of buried in the PACT Act, commonly talked about as the burn pit legislation of this year, is they gave those who are exposed kind of a new right to sue again. Talk to us about that.
Sure. So what they did is very unusual, and I credit President Biden and both Democrats and Republicans in the House and Senate. They created, given the passage of time, they created a 2-year window, which runs from August 10th of this year, 2022, until August 10th of 2024. And if you spent 30 days or more and you had one of these presumptive diseases, as you pointed out, Jim, throughout, really starting in the 80s, when Camp LeJeune became a Superfund site, until there was numerous studies. There's a branch of the Department of Health and Human Services called the ATTSR, which conducted 5 different research samples. And they do things like compare Marines who went through Camp LeJeune versus Camp Pendleton, or with other camps, or with the general populace. And what they found is 15 presumptive diseases. And so if you had one of these diseases, and it's a big list, but I'll try and get to it. If you had breast cancer, especially male breast cancer, kidney cancer, multiple myeloma, renal toxicity, which is a name for a body of kidney diseases, female infertility, scleroderma, non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, liver cancer, miscarriages, lung cancer, bladder cancer, leukemia, myelodysplastic syndromes, Parkinson's, hepatic steatosis, esophageal cancer, and neurobehavioral spinal issues. You suffer from a presumptive disease. What does that mean? That means it's no less likely than any other cause that the water, if you spend at least 30 days at Camp LeJeune, that the water at Camp LeJeune was so contaminated, loaded with toxins, that it is a significant cause of your disease.
Yeah, this is a huge issue. I'm a veterans disability lawyer, as Mike knows, and I deal with the VA. He deals with the court system. But this concept of a presumptive condition means I don't have to prove up my individual exposure and have an expert doctor saying, this leukemia is related to this because the exposure was that. Because of those studies that the government's already done, it's presuming you had enough exposure if you had that disease. So that's a huge evidence burden lifted from the veteran or the litigant, isn't it, Mike?
Absolutely. It's as if a defendant confessed. So the government's confessed on these 15 different serious illnesses that Camp LeJeune caused your problem if you spent at least 31 days there. And then, Jim, there's another group of 15 more that are likely, where it's likely that we don't have the same amount of proofs, but I and other lawyers working on this across the country, with doctors and epidemiologists, are putting together the evidence that we think that ultimately the Department of Navy and Department of Justice will admit that there were many other diseases caused by that. So what's the takeaway? The takeaway is if you were at Camp LeJeune for more than 31 days, from 53 to 87, and you have a serious illness, you should talk to someone. Talk to me. Talk to my folks, great, but talk to somebody and have it checked out.
I want to back up for a minute because you mentioned it, that the Office of Naval Justice or somebody, I don't know who the hell it is, talk about how this claim process that's only open for 2 years and then you're allowed to sue the government. Talk how that process is going to work, if we even know.
Well, it's kind of fun. As I said, this has never happened before. So a lot of it, we're working with a blank slate. But what any of your listeners can do is they go to a lawyer and of course, we'd love you to come to us, but go to a lawyer. And that lawyer, because these are contingency cases, they don't cost you any money. And go to the lawyer. They'll need your DD-214, medical records, which are really pretty easy to get these, with a release. And what the lawyer will do is get a doctor to take a look at it, see if it meets one of the criterias of the either presumptive diseases or the likely diseases. And then the lawyer will put together what's called an administrative claim. And that will go to the Department of Navy JAG Corps out of Charleston, South Carolina. And they're also, as you can imagine, because there's probably going to be tens of thousands of claims, the Department of Justice is going to help out. And they have 6 months to decide to make a settlement with you or deny your claim. And once they deny your claim within 6 months, then you have a right to go to federal court in North Carolina and seek your day in court. And quite frankly, it is set up to take care of veterans. President Biden and the Republicans and Democrats in the Congress have set this up not to say no and not to give away taxpayer money needlessly, but to say yes to those who have been legitimately damaged, which is unquestioned. And so that's the. So I want
second. Yeah, and it's much more complicated than that, but I want to draw some distinctions for folks because our veteran radio listeners are, pretty savvy, and they're used to VA claims and they're used to claims that take years and have a very complicated process administratively. But this is more streamlined, isn't it? It's not going to the VA. It's a totally different channel. It's going off to the Navy, and Navy JAG or DOJ is going to make this decision. And if they don't make the decision after 6 months, that gives you the right to sue. Is that how it works?
You hit it exactly, Jim. And it is extremely streamlined. It is set up, like I said, to take care of the folks who've been harmed.
Now, wait a minute. I want to go back, though, to now you have the right to sue. You got to have the right set of guys or firm or gals who are going to go to North Carolina and sue. So do I have to get a lawyer in North Carolina because that's where I might end up having to sue?
Well, I have a partner in North Carolina, but no. As you know, Jim, lawyers travel across the country and try cases all over the country. So I've done 150 jury trials, and for any of the folks of your listeners in Michigan, I just led the $490 million settlement against the University of Michigan for a doctor there who abused athletes. But you get a veteran trial lawyer who can go down to North Carolina and fight for you. And like I said, I have a partner we're teamed up with, a North Carolina lawyer. It's always helpful to have someone from the home court.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
But ultimately, as any listeners can understand, the federal government does not want to try all the cases, right? Because juries, when they see what's going on, what happened to people, and the poisoning, literally the poisoning of our veterans. That's not a day in court where a government lawyer wants to be in court that day. So we can't make guarantees, obviously, but the drafters of this legislation thought clearly, and quite frankly, the Department of Justice and the Department of Navy went along with this. They didn't try and fight it and veto it. And it is streamlined. To get back to your initial point, it is really streamlined to take care of this peculiar problem of the Camp LeJeune veterans.
And Mike, some people see these TV ads about class action lawyers on everything you can think about. But this is not a class action lawsuit, is it? These are, if I understand it right, what you've told us, these are individual claims with individual lawsuits that'll have to be brought.
Absolutely. So in University of Michigan, I had 230 individual clients. Each one of those people controlled their own case and agreed to the settlement. It's the same thing here. Your case is your case. You're not tied to any other veteran. And as a lawyer, whether it's me or someone else, we have to represent you individually and look out for your best interests. And so this is not some class action dodge or scam. This is all about you have control of your case. The lawyer works for you, and this is about you getting your day in court and or justice through a settlement.
Let me ask you a question that you probably get from the clients who are reaching out to you, and that goes along the lines of, hey, I currently have VA benefits. If I file a claim through this Camp LeJeune Justice Act and it proceeds and I'm successful, how does that impact my future VA benefits?
Sure. First and foremost, there's two different provisions of the Camp LeJeune Justice Act which say that you can't be in any worse place than before you filed, meaning you can't be punished by the VA for filing a claim. There may be an offset that can happen, but as you know, Jim, VA benefits are more circumscribed than a civil lawsuit. So, for instance, VA benefits don't take into account impacts on your family or loss of consortium, things of that would normally come up in a civil jury trial. And so therefore, the amounts and types of damages you can recover are broader in a lawsuit than they are in the VA setting. And so the bottom line is, more than likely, if you have a valid claim and you are impacted, this will be a supplement to your VA benefits, but it certainly will not be a detriment. The VA cannot punish you for taking part in this. The worst case scenario is you're not going to be in any worse place. But certainly, it makes, like I tell people, if you're in a car accident today, you would certainly go to a lawyer and check it out. And so it's certainly, and these cases are more serious and more deadly and had greater impacts than your average car case. So it's certainly worth checking this out. Because as I said, President Biden, whether Democrat, Republican, this divided time, is a bipartisan bill. And this isn't set up to hurt people currently getting VA benefits. This is set up to help supplement and help them further.
Well, this is great information to pass along to veterans, their family and friends, and this act in particular is broader than just veterans, it's family members, so that puts a whole new wrinkle on it that didn't exist before. And we're talking to Mike Cox, a Marine, a distinguished attorney. He served 8 years as the Michigan Attorney General. He's now handling a number of these Camp LeJeune water cases. And Mike, I think one of the important things for folks to know is that this is a limited window. The window's very small to get your claim in. Tell us again what the dates are for that window.
Okay, the dates are from now until August 10th of 2024. So we're now, the clock's ticked a little bit, so we're now at about 21 months. But if you have any questions about it, feel free to call our office or check our website at MikeCoxLaw.com. Again, that's MikeCoxLaw.com.
Mike, thanks for taking some time today to explain to our veteran radio listeners kind of what's going on at Camp LeJeune and this new act and this new window of opportunity to make some of these claims. We really appreciate your time today.
And Jim, thank you, because, you know, the motto of the Marines and really all our armed services are leave no one behind, right? And that's what really this is about. And so I appreciate you shedding some light on that. And I appreciate what you do and have done for veterans for the past 20 years.
Thanks, Mike. Appreciate it.
Hey.
And I want to thank everybody for listening to Veterans Radio today. I am Jim Fausone. It's been a pleasure to be your host. I'm a veterans disability lawyer at Legal Help for Veterans, and you can reach us at 800-693-4800 or legalhelpforveterans.com on the web. You can follow Veterans Radio on Facebook and listen to its podcasts and internet radio shows by going to veteransradio.net. And until next time, you are dismissed.
If you have a VA claim denied by the Board of Veterans' Appeals, contact Legal Help for Veterans at 1-800-693-4800. They're experts in handling cases before the U.S. Court of Appeals for Veterans Claims. Their number again, 1-800-693-4800.
We again want to thank our National sponsors, the National Veterans Business Development Council, nvbdc.org, VA Ann Arbor Health Care System, the Vietnam Veterans of America Charles S. Kettles Chapter, Ann Arbor, Michigan, VFW Graf O'Hara Post 423 in Ann Arbor, and the American Legion Press Corn Post 46, also in Ann Arbor. We appreciate all your support. You can go to veteransradio.net, click on the sponsor level, and continue to support keeping Veterans Radio on the air. And until next time, you are dismissed.
Okay, round two. Name something that's not boring.
A laundry? Ooh, a book club. Computer solitaire, huh?
Ah, sorry, we were looking for Chumba Casino. That's right, ChumbaCasino.com has over 100 casino-style games. Join today and play for free for your chance to redeem some serious prizes. ChumbaCasino.com. No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18+ terms and conditions apply. See website for details.